Now let's look at how do we actually deploy our site to Lagoon. And you probably guessed it already. There is a documentation that explains you how to do all of that. The first thing that you need to do is you need to give us access to the Git repository. So with Lagoon, you can actually decide your own Git hosting. So you can use GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, your own Git servers, or maybe some of the enterprise versions. We don't force you to any Git servers. So what I will do here in my example, I will initialize a Git. I will add all the files. I will commit that. And I will now create a new Git repository in my own personal GitHub. I will call it Lagoonize Webinar. I will create that. And I will add the origin to my local environment. And now I'm ready to push. Before I do that though, as mentioned, we need to provide access for Lagoon to actually be able to deploy. And so to do that, you go to settings and you add a collaborator. So there is a user called Amazy.io deploy, and we add that as a collaborator. This will trigger now an automatic response. And if we refresh, we can already see the user automatically accepted it. And so now this means Amazy.io has access. If this would be a private repository, you can actually also say that we only need to have a read access. We don't need to write access because we only want to deploy your site. We don't want to change it. And the other thing that we also need is we need to define some webhooks. So over here in our documentation, we have documentation which explains you how to give us access to it, because each of the different systems have different webhooks. So in here, we can see we have documentation for GitHub, GitLab, and basically what we need to add is just these hooks. So we go back to my Git repository and I add this hook. Now, by default, GitHub only adds the push event, which is fine, but we're actually going to see later, Lagoon also has functionalities for pull requests. So we not only send the webhooks for pushes, but also for pull requests. And we add that, and we will see now we have a green tick. So that means GitHub shortly checked if that URL is actually correct. It is correct, and so we're ready to push. So let's do that. Let's go back to our terminal, and I push that up to my GitHub repository, and we can see it pushed it in there. We can go over here, and I see the Lagoonize webinar is all here. I can see my first commit. So let's see how our deployment does, and we can see it's failed. If we actually click on it, we can see the logs of them, and at the very end, no surprise, it tells us a missing database because we don't have one. So let's be nice to our Drupal and actually give them that. So we can just run rush SQL sync. And what this will now do, it will take the database from the local environment and create an SQL dump from it. And it will connect. So we can see it will start it on the source, that is my local. And it will now connect via SSH, authenticated via my SSH key into the site that is running on Lagoon, and it will synchronize it over there, and it will automatically import it there. And this is actually the exact same command that will now also run if we push into any other environment. It's the same process that will automatically run every time you deploy a completely new environment. Again, it's fully configurable. If you want to use another tool or something else, that's possible. So let's give that a bit more seconds. until the database is imported. This is done. Now we're going to do the same, and we're going to run an SQL and rsync, and this will now synchronize the files as well, because the files we need. And it will do that in the background for us. And the files will be synchronized as well. Now I want to trigger another deployment. There's actually quite a cool system that we use. So if we read the documentation over here and go to our first deployment, so we're just going to use an empty push. And with that, outside of the container. And I will also add all the stuff. So all the things I added, I will add them. And so we changed the post rollout with sync. And we push that. And this will now create another deployment. So if we go to our site, so we're here, go to deployments, we can now see it just started another deployment, and it will update that automatically. Now, you maybe say, okay, that's nice to go into the UI, but what about better tools? So we really think that it's nice to go into UI, but I feel like there could be something better, and there is. So we actually have support for Slack and Rocket Chat that you can connect the Amazy.io deploy bot into your chat system. And that means every time that somebody pushes and Lagoon will deploy, it will automatically show you that in the chat system. So we see for the first one, a couple of minutes ago, we pushed into the master and it failed. And we also have an automated link to the logs. So we don't even have to log into the UI because we can see the logs right there. Now we have a new one, the master. It's not done yet, therefore it's still in the pending phase. But as soon as this is done, it will tell us if it actually worked or not. And so we see many customers that have per project, they have a Slack or a Rocket Chat or any other chat system and channels, and they add these deployments in there. So you can see exactly who pushed what, who did start one, did the deployment work. You don't have to tell the customer we're deploying now, because if they are in the chat system, they will also see that automatically. So this is another cool way for you to see in there. But of course, you have access to the GraphQL API. We actually have GraphQL subscription support. So if you write your own client system that can read subscriptions, you can also use them. So I shortly peeked over and our deployment succeeded. So we can see the Lagoon 3, it is completed. And now we can also see our routes. So what Lagoon does, it automatically creates for all the services that we deployed that actually have an HTTP access. So Nginx and Varnish, it automatically creates routes. And so if I go to the Nginx one, it now opens me my Umami site that I pushed in it, and we will see it automatically loaded in here. And I also have a Varnish version. So if you ever wondered, how do I shortly disable Varnish? Well, you just have another URL. And so these routes, they're automatically created by Lagoon. They have SSL certificates automatically, nothing to worry about. And as we saw in the .lagoon.yaml, you can also define additional routes. So they will then allow you to access your actual site, I don't know, umami.com or whatever. But for every environment, we automatically create these routes. They automatically have let's encrypt on them. So if we go back to, let's say, the Lagoonize webinar and my Michi test, you can see that also for that one, we automatically created an environment and URLs, and of course the same also for the PRs. So that means they automatically created, and you don't have to worry about adding routes all the time, any SSL things, that kind of stuff.